Alright, so when walking on the Pinecrest Shake, we want to stay to the bottom part of the panel. We want to stay out of the middle and stay away from walking on the side laps. So you can see just walking across this, staying out of the middle of the panel, and you won't dent it. Layout and fastening for the Pinecrest Shake will go as follows. So when I'm on the bottom row, I'm going to have a 1/2 inch overhang, and my fasteners are going to be 1.5 inches up from the edge. You'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll come back in the back. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next panel will come on and we'll share those fasteners. Now when I'm laying it out, the Pinecrest Shake has locating points. You're going to see there's one here, it's the double, and then there's also one here on the double. Now they will take one of my edges on my next panel. So you can see here that the waterways all line up. So that's going to be one panel here. And then when I fasten this one, we're going to go down through the front nose. So you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. And the back shelf will stay the same. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then once again, we'll have my hip points or locating points right here. And you can see the waterways will go ahead and line up once again. When dealing with our Pinecrest Shake direct to deck, you're going to want to do the following for our standard install. Now the Pinecrest Shake can go left to right or it can go right to left. You're going to have factory edges on everything. Okay? So once we get our drip edge, our gutter riser, chalk our line to achieve a 1/2 inch overhang, and we're going to go ahead and start doing our panels. So first panel on the bottom row, we'll come down, make sure we're straight with our chalk line. And you can see we're going to come about 1.5 to 2 inches up, just a screw length up, and go ahead and fasten that fastener down through the top of the panel. Get one on the left side, and then go ahead and make sure that's straight, and get one on the right side. Now the panel is locked in, I can fill in my fasteners. Okay? Now you can see that I have 4 in the front, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'm going to need the same amount in the back shelf as well. So we're going to come back here and fasten in that back shelf. Now when I'm doing the back shelf ones, make sure I don't over tighten these. We don't want to flatten out this back shelf and flatten out our 90°. So now you can see once I'm all done with this one, you're going to have 4 in the front and 4 in the back. And that's going to be for our filled panels or our full panels. Once I get that fastened, you can come back with your next panel, and you can see how these are going to overlap. They're just going to fit into the grooves. So approximately 2-inch overlap. And then since this is the bottom row still, we're going to go ahead and fasten through the top on the bottom, and get those fastened in the back as well. Once I get that panel on, I can come back and start my second row. So the second row, you can see I'm going to find my locator points. Okay? Each panel is going to have 2 location points, one there and one on this side as well. Now it's very important to hit these because you can see once I find my locator points, I put one of my ends of the panel into that locator point, and then it's going to make all of my waterways on the back shelf and front shelf line up, as you can see here. Okay, those have to line up to fit correctly. So then I go ahead and just overlap those. And now here, from the second row up, we're going to go ahead and put the fastener through the front nose on an angle to get that screwed back into the deck. So once again, one on the left, make sure this is nice and tight up here. One on the right, now that panel is locked in. Now I can go ahead and fill in the rest of my fasteners. Once again, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 on the front nose. Now I'm going to need that same 4 in the back, just like we did on the bottom. Make sure we don't over tighten those. And then once I get those fasteners all in, I'm going to find those locating points once again. Like I said, each panel is going to have 2. And it's going to be those doubles that you can see there. And we take our next panel and we find where one of our ends is going to fit into that locating point. You can see how tight that will fit, and then we'll go ahead and fasten just like we did on row 2 through the front nose. Now when we're all said and done, the bottom row, since we did go through the top, we're going to take our caulking and go ahead and caulk those fasteners, and then take the chip from our touch-up kit and throw the chip into that caulking so it will blend into the panel. Alright, so when we're doing our rake and our Eave with our Pinecrest shake, this is how we're going to do our layout. So first we'll come back with our drip edge, make sure we wrap our corners, install this with nails or screws every 16 inches. Then come back with a code approved underlayment, come over the top of that one, and then we'll come back with our rake drip edge, make sure we wrap our corners, and we'll fasten that every 16 inches on center. Then we'll come back with our rake batten. We'll measure 3 inches in from the edge of my rake. We'll go ahead and line up that batten to our marks and fasten in every puck using the EBS system, and fasten those with a nail or a screw. And then we'll come back with our gutter riser. We're going to butt that up against our rake batten and go flush with my drip edge. And fasten every 16 inches with a washer screw. And then we'll go ahead and mark our 14 inches from my drip edge. Go ahead and mark this. Come back with my chalk line here and chalk this a line for our first panel so we have our 1/2 inch overhang. Alright, after I get all my filled panels on, we're going to come back and measure our rake panels. So when we're measuring our rake panels, we're going to want to come from a stamp in the profile. So with the shake, we're going to measure from this groove here. Do not measure from the edges. Then we're going to measure to our 2x2, and we're going to minus a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch to make sure that we get that panel fitting correctly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to measure all of our panels going up that aspect on that rake. And then what we'll do is we'll write down all those measurements as we go. And we're going to keep these in order, and then we're going to go ahead and bring that list down to our cutting and bending station. Then we'll come back and we're going to find that same groove that we measured from on the roof. We'll go ahead and measure this one, and that measurement we have will be our bend line. So we're going to do our bend line, and then we can either add 1.5 inches to 2 inches, or we can use a 2x2, and we can go ahead and mark our cut line and our bend line. Then once we get that marked, we'll go ahead and take the panels over to our cutter and bender. We're going to cut first, and then we'll go ahead and take it over to the bender, and we're going to bend this one up since we're doing a rake panel. So you can see we're just going to have that folded up on that panel. Now once I get all my panels done off of my list, they're going to be in order. And then I can go ahead and grab my panels and start installing them from the eave up. Now you can see they're just going to be installed just like they would a regular panel. Go ahead and get those fasteners in just like a regular panel on the front nose and the back shelf. And the panels will be in order from our stack, so we can just continue up the roof, fastening as normal. Now, as far as our fold up, we want to make sure our fold up is at least flush with our 2x2. If it is a little bit longer, we can go ahead and take a mallet and fold that over since it's going to get a cap. All right, so when we're doing our 5V prep work for direct to deck, you want to do the following steps. So first of all, you get your drip edge on, underlayment over the top, and then you're ready to go ahead and put your valley in. So option one, I can go ahead and take my valley and cut my Eave line out, and then go ahead and overhang the entire width of the valley, minimum of 3/4 of an inch. And then we can go ahead and fasten this with our 1/4 inch hex head neoprene washered screws. They'll go on the outside of the valley pan on both sides every 2 feet, going up either side. Now when I do my valley metal down, I can go ahead and bring my gutter riser flush with my valley. I can bring it to the first V, or I can bring it to the second V on top here. Make sure to put no fasteners in the gutter riser over the valley pan so that water can weep out underneath the gutter riser. Only fasten along the Eave line outside the valley pan. Now the other option, if we don't want to see these ribs or this painted metal coming out of the Eave line, is to create a valley extension. So a valley extension is made from our stone coated steel flat stock. Going to create a water stop on either side, and then I can go ahead and do a fold over hem on the bottom of this as well. So now we're going to go ahead and overhang this, the minimum of 3/4 of an inch over our Eave line. Then we'll take our caulking, go ahead and do 2 lines of caulking, and then we will slide our valley into that valley extension. So now all you'll see coming out of the Eave line will be the stone coat to match my panels. And then we can come back with our fasteners every 2 feet on the outside, on either side of the valley pan. And then every 2 feet going up. Then we'll come back with our gutter riser and bring that even to my valley and fasten as normal. Okay, once we get our 5V valley in and our filled panels on, we'll be ready to do our valley cuts. So we're going to be doing a closed valley. So we're going to measure from the inside V of the 5V valley. And each measurement on each panel will have 2 measurements. We'll have one on the front nose and one on the back shelf. Remember, we want to go ahead and measure from the profile and not the edge. So go ahead and take your tape measure, measure into that inside V on the front nose and also on the back nose, as you can see here. Make sure they're staying straight across. So once we get those measurements, go ahead and write those down. And we'll continue to measure every panel or every row as we're going up from the eave to the ridge. So once we get all those measurements down on my list, I take my list down to my cutting station. I find that same profile that I measured from on the roof. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at my measurements and figure out my measurements from that profile. Mark on the front nose, come over, mark on the top. Now I take a straight edge, and that's going to be my bend line, and then approximately 1 inch from that line, we're going to go ahead and make a cut line. So you can see I have a bend line and a cut line. Take it to your cutter. We can cut that, and then we'll take it over to our bender. And go ahead and bend this down since it's a valley. See, I'll have that bend down. Now once I get my list done, I'm going to have a pile, and it's going to be in order. Go ahead and take that pile, hand it up to the roof. So I'll take the top of my pile, it's going to be my Eave panel. Go ahead and make sure that fits, and then fasten as normal. So on the bottom row, go ahead and get those fasteners down through the top. Now make sure I find where my valley pan is and fasten just to the outside of the valley pan. We don't want any fasteners over our valley pan. Go ahead and finish fastening those. Get those fasteners in the back shelf as well. And on the top, make sure I get one as close to the valley as possible without penetrating the valley's middle. Then go ahead and take your next panel from the row. Place that one. Go ahead and fasten as normal. Once again, getting that fastener as close to the valley pan without going inside the valley pan. Fasten those as normal. Get your tops as close to that valley as you can. Now, if you do need to put a fastener over the valley pan, use one of your 3/4 inch stitch screws and go ahead and stitch those panels together. Just like so. That way we don't put any fasteners into the valley pan. Then we go ahead and continue with our panels, fastening those as normal. Alright, so we can keep the valley just like we have it here, keeping it closed if you like. You can also use our valley cover to go over the top of this. Now the valley cover is just going to go over and we're going to use our 3/4 inch stitch screw to stitch that together. Now if you're worried about any tree leaves or any debris getting in, we can use our M-Seal. It's an expandable foam, and go ahead and put that on the underside. That way it won't let the leaves inside the system. So then we're going to go ahead and center this. Make sure we're not blocking off any water flow with our bend down there. And then we're just going to stitch this into the panels on each nose on either side. And do every nose as we're going up the valley. Alright, so your hip battens are going to be centered with my hip line. Going to be fastened in every puck on the EBS system. And then we're going to go ahead and center those 5 inches apart from outside to outside. So once we get our hip battens in, we'll do our filled panels and it will come to our hip sections for our cuts. So when we're measuring our panels, make sure you come from the profile on the shake, not the edge, but the profile. And then we're going to measure from our bottom edge and our back edge. So you can see just measuring into that batten, like so, and then coming into the top batten as well. Make sure I minus 1/4 inch from my measurements, that way they'll fit nice and easy. What we're going to do is we're going to measure all of our panels starting from the eave to the ridge, and we're going to write down those 2 measurements per panel. So once I get all those measured, we'll go ahead and take my list down to my cutting station. Look at my measurements. Find that same profile we measured from on the roof. Go ahead and mark those on the back shelf and the front shelf. Mark off my measurements. Then I can take my 2x2 and go ahead and mark my bend line where that measurements were. And then 1.5 inches past, we'll mark that cut line. So then we'll take it over to my cutter. Once we're done cutting, we'll take it over to the bender. We're going to fold this up since it is a hip. Fold down hip, just like so. Now once I get all my lists done, I'll have a pile like so that's going to be in order. And we'll hand that up to the roof. So the first one will be in order. We're going to go ahead and put that one down on the eave first. Fasten that like normal. Getting my measurements on my bottom edge and also my top edge. Then we'll come back with our next panel from our pile. Close that and fasten that as normal. Go ahead and take our next panel from our pile, and keep working up the hip. Now we want to make sure we measure these and cut these where my cut is going to be even with my 2x2. If it's a little long, I can take my mallet and go ahead and fold those over. Alright, so when we build up our 2x2s on our ridge, you can have a few different options. One option is to do a traditional stack of two 2x2s on either side. You can see we'll just be fastening those into our rafters. If we do this method, we want to make sure that my outside edges of my 2x2s are approximately 5 inches apart, because I need my cap to fit over the top of those. The other option is going to be a single stack of 2x2s. So place one 2x2, fasten into the rafters, another 2x2, and then fasten into the existing 2x2. Now this height of this might need to be adjusted depending on the pitch of the roof and the construction of the roof. You might need to add or subtract battens on this one. The third option is going to be our ridge riser brackets. You can see these are just metal brackets that we're going to fasten into a single 2x2, and then we can adjust the height by putting a bend on it to whatever height we're trying to achieve. And then we'll go ahead and just fasten those down into the roofing. Now the reason we're putting our 2x2s up the ridge is because we're going to be bending our panel up against that 2x2 and then coming back with our caps, and that gives us something to fasten our caps into. Alright, after we get our filled panels on, we're going to go ahead and measure our top row. We're going to measure from the shelf here to the 2x2. Make sure we minus a 1/4 inch to ensure a good fit. So once I get all my measurements, we're going to go ahead and mark our panels. And we have to have a 2-inch fold up. So we're going to mark our bend line and our cut line like we've been doing. Then we're going to go ahead and bend this first on the back of the bender. And then we'll go ahead and cut this. Once we get all our top rows cut, we'll go ahead and bring them up. Now these will distort a little bit when I'm cutting them and bending them. So what we're going to want to do is put a screw in one side. Then you might have to manipulate that panel to fit. Put one on this side. And then we'll come back in the middle and go ahead and push down that middle and start filling in the rest of my fasteners. Alright, so when we're playing with the ridge vent with our shake cap and our bend up, we'll do the following steps. So first we're going to cut our decking back so we get airflow from the attic so we can vent it. And then we're going to come back with our batten buildup. So we can do a traditional buildup of 2x2s, one on top of each other, or we can come back with our ridge riser brackets. It's one 2x2 and then bend these according to the height that we need. Now the height is very important when I'm building these up because we need to have our cap a 1/2 inch off of our panels so we can get that airflow going. So make sure that we build this up correctly, and that will change with pitches of roof. After that, we go ahead and take our unified steel ridge vent and we place that on our 2x2s just like so. Then we're going to come back with our panel. We're going to fold it up 2 inches and then we'll install these. The front nose we're going to install like normal. And the back shelf, we're going to go ahead and fasten these into our 2x2. We need to make sure we don't over tighten these because we don't want to block the airflow with our venting. Right. We're going to do both sides of this. And then we're going to come back with our cap, and our cap will sit right on that 2x2 that we've adjusted to the right height to make sure that we're a 1/2 inch off of our panel. And then we'll fasten these into that 2x2. Alright, so once we get all our hip panels on, we'll be ready to do our cap. So as long as our 2x2s are centered, our cap will stay nice and straight. So when we're starting with our starter piece, we're going to take one of our 6-inch end discs, and once again I can field modify that. And you can see here, we just go ahead and find my drip edge and go ahead and cut that out so this fits back nice and tight. So once we get there, make sure that's sitting nice and tight. Then our fasteners are going to be one on either side. And then we'll go ahead and just overlap our next one, fitting over our panels in 2x2, and then once again just fasteners on either side. And then we'll go ahead and just keep on going up our hip, fastening it. Alright, so when we're doing a hip to a ridge intersection on our shake bend up, we're going to go ahead and find our measurement to that 2x2 and notch that one, put a fold in this cap, place that against that 2x2 and then fasten on either side. Then we'll take our caulking, go ahead and put caulking down that bend, and then we're going to find our miter, notch that out on the next cap, and we'll place that down into that caulking and fasten on either side. Then we'll take our first ridge piece, we're going to notch where it runs into my caps on either side, and then we can go ahead and mark where that bend is on the rake or hip cap, and then we'll go ahead, caulk down that one, and place this guy into that caulking and fasten that one on either side. Then we can go ahead and start doing our ridge cap, putting fasteners on either side into my 2x2. Continue that across. Alright, so once we get our rake panels in, we're ready to go ahead and put our cap on. So as long as I did my 3 inches in with my 2x2, I can go ahead and take my shake cap, put a 90-degree bend on the roof side of that cap. Now once we do that one, we're going to go ahead and take our 6-inch end disc, and we're going to field modify that into a triangle, and that's going to fit on our first cap. So take your 3/4 inch stitch screws, go ahead and fasten that into that cap, and then it's going to be ready to go onto the rake. So then our fasteners on the top are going to go into the 2x2. So you can see here, I'm just going to go right through the top into that 2x2. Then I'm go ahead and take my next cap right on top here once again. Get our fastener through the top once again. And then go ahead and take the rest of my caps and fasten those as we're going up the rake. Now on the fascia board, each cap is going to need a fastener as well, just like so. Now the fasteners down through the top, just like our bottom row, we're going to have to go ahead and take our caulking, caulk those, and then take my granules and go ahead and put that on all my top screws going up the rake. So when the rake comes to a ridge intersection, we're going to go ahead and take our regular caps And we'll mark these accordingly. And get the following cuts. So first one, we're going to find our back flange where it hits my ridge. Go ahead and extend this past. It's going to fit just like so. My next cap, I'm going to go ahead and take that back flange again, notch that one, and then find my miter to match my miter line of my fascia boards. And then we'll go ahead and fasten as normal. Getting fasteners in the top. And also on the fascia board. Then my first ridge cap is going to be notched. Once again, we'll find where that cap comes, notch that one. And you can see that'll fit right over the top, lining up with my miter. And then when I come off my ridge, caps are going to sit right on top. You can see my 2x2 and my panel fill bent up. The 2x2 is where my fasteners are going to go into. So you can see, once I get this down nice and tight, go ahead and fasten those into that 2x2, one on either side. And then we go ahead and just place those and fasten as normal, going the rest of the way on the ridge. Alright, so when we get to a skylight or chimney, we're going to do all our filled panels around it. Then we can come back and measure all of our panels, mark, cut, and bend those panels, bring them up in a pile, and then they'll go on as accordingly. So first we'll have our short course down at the bottom, so we'll have that measurement. Okay. We're going to fold that up a minimum of 2 inches. Make sure that my panel is at least 4 inches past my corner. And then we'll find my corner, go ahead and notch that with snips, and then we'll start wrapping our corner and flatten out in our back shelf just like so. Then we'll come back with our caulking, go ahead and caulk that bend down the panel. And then we'll come back with our panel here. And you can see I got my minimum 2-inch bend up. Once again, I find my corner, notch that, wrap this guy. And then we'll go ahead and install that panel right down into that caulking, and we can come back and start fastening our panel. And our second panel is going to be the fold up, minimum of 2 inches. Come in and just install that as normal. Just go ahead and fasten as we're going up. And when we get to the top, okay, once again we're going to fold up our 2 inches and we're going to find that corner again. Go ahead and notch that and wrap my corner. Then install that as normal. Alright, once we get all our panels onto this chimney or skylight, we're going to come back with our counter flash. We can use our 3.5-inch fascia as a counter flash if we need to, or we got our 5-inch Z-bar. Okay? So we're going to show the Z-bar here. So once I get my panels all bent up, installed, we're going to come back. You can see we're just going to cover up those bends with that Z-bar. So go ahead and put our folds on this guy. Fasten it into my sidewall, and head wall. Then we're going to come back with that Z-bar. Go ahead and put your folds on it to make it look nice. Fold the back edge, and then go ahead and cover those cuts up, just like so. Go ahead and fasten into your sidewall. Then we can come back with our caulking and go ahead and caulk all that along the head walls and the side walls. Now after we get our counter flashes on all our sides, we can go ahead and take our flat stock It comes at 54 inches by 18 inches. And then we're going to go ahead and cut and bend a chimney saddle pan. Okay? So you can see I'm just going to get my measurement from my top of my panel to the back of my chimney or skylight. Find that measurement. Go ahead and fold up the wall what you need. And then we're just going to bend in just like our panel is on the back shelf. Go ahead and take your caulking. Okay. Go ahead and caulk along there. And then this is going to sit right into that caulking just like so. Extend this 3 or 4 inches past my corner. That way my moisture gets away from the corners of the skylight or chimney. Right. Once we get that in, we can come back and counterflash it or fasten it. Just like so. And we can fasten it back into the sidewall as well. Then we can also go ahead and take our counterflash, whatever we need, and go ahead and counterflash the back of that skylight or chimney as well. Then before we put our next panel on, we're going to come back with our M-sill. Since we have a flat back here, we want to protect that. So we're going to go ahead and put that M-sill on there. And then you can come back with your next panel. Just like so. And you might have to fasten that back through the top because the chimney will be in the way. And then once we get out past the chimney, we can fasten as normal. And there you can see our chimney skylight all flashed. Alright, if you're going to use one of our easy vents for venting, we'll go ahead and cut the decking out 29 by 5 inches. We also recommend putting a screen over that hole. That way we don't get any insects into the attic. Go ahead and fasten that. And then we'll come back with our easy vent. You can see it's just a panel that we put a vent on top of it and stone coated it. It's going to install just like a normal panel. So we'll go ahead and put this one on. Fasten through the front nose. And we'll also go ahead and fasten through the top just like we do the regular panel. Once we get all my fasteners across the top, we're going to go ahead and come back with our M-sill. Since we have that flat vent on there, we want to go ahead and put this on in between our top panel. And we're going to go ahead and take our top panel, sandwich that M-sill in between the two, and then behind the vent only, we're going to go ahead and fasten down through the top. Just like so. Make sure you caulk and chip these screws that go down through the top just like our bottom row. Alright, so when we're doing a pipe on our shake, we can do the sandwich method. So what you're going to do is you're going to first find your hole where your pipe is. Go ahead and cut around that pipe. Then take our caulking. Go ahead and put caulking around that pipe. Then bring my pipe jack over the top into that caulking. Then we can come back with either a full panel or a partial panel as long as it covers my pipe jack. And then we're going to go ahead and cut that out and we're going to sandwich the pipe jack into that panel. Just like so. Then we'll come back and just fasten the panels as normal. and caulk around that pipe. And then use our touch-up kit to go ahead and put the sprinkles on that caulking. And then you can finish it off with our pipe sleeve, just like so. Now we're going to show using our split course method or standard method when we're flashing a pipe on a Pinecrest shake directed deck. So first we'll locate our pipe, go ahead and cut our base panel around that pipe. Take your caulking, do a bead of caulking below the pipe. And we're going to go ahead and flatten this out slightly. And then we're going to take our pipe jack and anything behind the coursing, we're going to go ahead and do a water stop. So we're going to fold it over on itself. That way no wind-driven rain gets underneath the pipes. So then we'll go ahead and place this into the caulking. And then we can go ahead and fasten that down through the top into that caulking. And then we're going to go ahead and come back with our pipe or our panel, and we're going to go ahead and cut that pipe jack out as tight as possible. And we're going to go ahead and place that panel and make sure it's fitting nice and tight. Then we can come back and fasten the panels with our normal fastening pattern. Then once we get all our fastening done, we'll come back with our caulk. And our touch-up kit. We'll go ahead and come around and caulk around that pipe. And then we'll come back with our granules and put them in that caulking. And then we can finish it off using our pipe sleeve. The pipe sleeve is just going to fit over the top here. And I can trim this to whatever pitch the roof is. And then we can go ahead and fasten back into the pipe here. And then you'll be all set to go. Okay, so when we're running with a stepped eave, you're going to go ahead and keep the eave line the same with the drip edge and the gutter riser. Do our rake battens, just like we would do with the regular rake. And then we'll start to lay this out to keep the bottom course our short course. Do not put the short courses in the middle of the field. Keep them down at the eave. All right, we're going to start laying this out. We're going to come with our bottom row. Treat it just like we would any other bottom row. We're going to come down here, fasten down through the top. Make sure I have a 1/2 inch overhang. Then we need to determine where my course is going to line up on this bottom panel. Then we come back with our M-sill, place our M-sill across the bottom here. Just like so. Then we'll come back with our next course. Make sure it's nice and tight up top. Make sure all my grooves are lining up with the shake. And then once we're all settled, we can start fastening this. Now when we fasten our short course, since it's overhanging, we need to go down through the top into that M-sill. Alright, once we get all our panels on the short course, then it'll be time to address this rake. So we go ahead and just put our end cap on just like we do our regular rake ends. Go ahead and hook that first one, fasten down into the 2x2 just like we normally would. Then we're going to come back, find our angle and our drip edge, go ahead and notch that out, slide that underneath our cap, just like so. And then fasten that cap as normal, down through that 2x2. Then we can go ahead and notch our panel. Throw some caulking underneath this one, right here. Then we can go ahead and press this panel down and fasten it as normal. And then just remember any screws down through the top, so in our bottom rows and our cap, we're going to go ahead, come back with our caulking. And then our touch-up kit, go ahead and throw those granules into that caulking on all those screws going down through the top of the panels and caps. Alright, so when we need to add a solar mount, we'll go ahead and take our direct-to-deck solar mount. We're going to find a rafter, and then we're going to go ahead and pre-drill our holes. After we pre-drill our holes, bring your caulking back, fill where those holes are going to be, and we'll come back with our lag bolts and fasten this mount to the decking. Then we'll go ahead, place our panel, and fasten as normal. When we're doing a dormer valley, we can go ahead and take our flat stock and create a valley extension. So you can see I just got a water stop on either side, and then we can go ahead and notch this out according to our situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to form that bottom panel. Then we're going to go ahead and take our caulking, caulk across that one, and then we're going to lay our valley extension into that caulking. Just like so. Make sure I have at least a 1-inch overhang of my drip edge, and then go ahead and put caulking underneath our valley, like so. Then we can come back with our washer fasteners and fasten that on either side. And now you can see, instead of seeing the painted rib metal, we're only going to see our stone coat coming out of the valley. So go ahead and put our valley pieces in. You can see those will go just like so. And just like so here as well. And then we can choose to use our valley cover to cover that up and stitch screw to my panels. When we're all done with our aspect, we can come back with our finishing touches, and we can use our touch-up kit. We can cover up blemishes, cuts, and like on our bottom row, we're going to go ahead and caulk our bottom row screws that go down through the top, and then use our granules on top of that. So we'll go ahead and bring that caulking around, smooth it out the best you can.